In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Dear brothers and sisters, last Sunday for the Feast of All Saints, the first Sunday after Pentecost, we reflected that the proper response to Pentecost is to make saints. It's not to engage in speculative theology, or philosophy, invent all kinds of doctrines, or indeed to worry over much about behavior and moralism and so forth, all the things that we associate with the Church. The Church has one purpose, and it is to prepare us for that inevitable union with God that we will have. The purpose of the Church is to make saints. To make saints of those who are within, and to go out into the world with the mission of God Himself, empowered by the Holy Spirit, to make saints of all people. But how do we do that? How do we go about this? In recent times, in addition to the Feast of All Saints, it has become customary to, on this, the second Sunday after Pentecost, to remember local saints, the saints of our own land. And in our own case, given it is new land for Orthodoxy, it's not only in our place, but in our time, really, in the last couple of hundred of years. And when we look at and commemorate the saints of our own day and age and our own place, it becomes much easier for us to understand what it is that makes a saint. Because so often it's tempting to think of saints as those people who are so far removed from us in other times and in other places. And we might even imagine, if we cared enough to think about ourselves being saints, we might think, well, if only we were there in the glory of Byzantium or in Holy Russia, or indeed, if only there were some sort of horrible persecuting force that would make me a martyr, then it would be easier. Rather than having to be a saint, well, let's say in my own family, or at work, or with the people who drive in the streets of Toronto. That's much harder, isn't it, than in Byzantium or Holy Russia, or under persecution when great numbers of martyrs are raised up. It's very tempting for us to remove the saints from our own orbit, from our own place, from our own time. It's harder to do when we remember those who were living in the living memory of people that we know, or who were the ones who founded churches in which we worship. Go to Western Canada, you'll find a great number of churches that were founded by St. Tico, for example. Or we know people who in the church today who knew saints, people glorified, whether that be St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, the wonder worker whose glorification was 25 years ago this weekend. But people remember him and tell stories of him. And it's harder, therefore, to separate the saints from us. But more importantly, perhaps, when we look at their lives, we begin to understand what it is that makes a saint. And we understand that when we look at all of their lives, that there is actually no script. There is no particular formula. There is no predefined way of going about it. That's very instructive for us. Because often, and I hear this a lot in confession, and most of us are probably tempted to it, we sort of think, well, wouldn't it be good if God just outlined exactly what it is we are supposed to do? At every given moment, wouldn't it be nice if we had some direction as to what to say, or what to think, or what to do? But it wasn't like that for any of the saints. And in fact, it is the byproduct of the overlapping of the ages. I'll explain that for a moment. It was the expectation of Israel, of course, that the day of the Lord would come. God would come onto the scene and would fulfill all their expectations. Kingship would be restored, the temple worship, and all nations would acknowledge the one true God. The day of the Lord would sort everything out, for once and for all. And of course, the day of the Lord arrives with the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But instead of wrapping things up there and then for all time, the Lord promises to return, and in the meantime to send his Holy Spirit. So we await the fulfillment of the day of the Lord, even though the age to come has already been enacted. The ages overlap, this present age, the age to come. And what does that mean for us? It means not everything is yet worked out. It means, as I said, there's no script. All of the acts of the play have unfolded. We're in Act 5. And it turns out the playwright hasn't given us a script. The previous acts are there for us to read and to know in the Holy Scriptures, in the lives of the prophets and martyrs of the saints. But we ourselves are left knowing indeed what the end of the play will be. The Lord will return. All things will be wrapped up. All things will be put to rights. But in the meantime, we're left like actors for whom the entire play, except Act 5, has been written. And what do we do? Does that mean we can do anything we want? No, it means like good improv actors, we immerse ourselves in the story of the play that has already been written. But we must not stray on the one hand, from fidelity to that story. But on the other hand, we mustn't think that the thing to do is simply repeat what went before. In other words, we must be fully immersed in the themes, in the story of God as written in Acts 1 through 4. But Act 5 not being written means that we must create, we must act alongside God. You know, in Ephesians, St. Paul writes that we are God's poetry. We are God's creation, his co-creators as poets, as poems of creation. And we must act procreatively in this, the fifth act, whose script has not been given to us, and yet whose end is known. And good improv actors know how to do that. It's not that they do whatever they choose. They must act in keeping with the character, with the themes that they've been given. But without the words, they must create. They must newly form the story which is unfolding before them. And that is what we see in the saints, particularly in the saints of our own day and age who are close to us. Each of them faithful to what went before, but creative in newly forming holiness in the time and place in which they live. Not thinking, well, holiness is for another time, a different age, a different place, but rather improvising in the faithfulness to tradition where they were. It's perhaps helpful to think, for those of you who aren't expert improv actors, to think perhaps of a musical metaphor. You think of jazz, for example. And those who are maybe outside of that might be thinking that when people are playing jazz, they just play whatever the heck they want, right? They can, because they're just improvising. That must be what it's about. We do what we please. But that wouldn't work. A jazz musician improvising is one who is fully immersed in the rhythm, in the harmonic patterns of what's being played. And yes, they are creating all the time, giving new, fresh expression to what is being played. Playing it for the first time even, something that has never been heard before, but faithful to what has been played so that it all works together. and knowing with all the other musicians what the end of the piece will be. That is our lot as Christians after Pentecost, those called to be saints. And there is indeed no other category of Christian. All of us are called to do that. None of us given exactly what to do, but we know where the church has come from. We know the first 4 acts of the play. We can immerse ourselves in those themes, in those rhythms, in those patterns. And remaining faithful at all times to them, we need to give fresh expression today to what it means to be a saint. And that will look different today than ever it has before. That will look different and have new expression in ways that previous generations and saints could not have imagined. And this has always been the way in the church. And new and surprising things happen in the church. Just as one example out of many, think of the end to slavery in the 19th century. Do you know, faithfulness to tradition in one sense might have said, well, there are more verses which promote slavery than would oppose it in the scriptures. And for 19 centuries, the church didn't do a whole lot about slavery. But then, fresh, new insight and expression given during the 1800s, and Christians realized that actually living out the gospel in their day meant to oppose this and put an end to the slavery of human beings. And so now it's unthinkable that anyone should enslave another human being. And yet that took saints and fresh expression of the gospel in a new age. We mustn't be afraid, dear brothers and sisters, to find the ways that we need to be saints today, in our age, in our city, in the ways that all of the saints we commemorate today did in North America over the last few generations. But always remember to avoid the two extremes. On the one hand, to simply think, well, we're improvising, therefore we can do whatever we want. All bets are off. You know, let's make the church like whatever we like. We can't do that. We must be faithful. True improv is faithful to where it comes from and to the themes given. But on the other hand, we mustn't just simply say to be Orthodox Christian is to repeat the story of what went before. To say again the words from Acts 1 through 4. Nobody would enjoy Act 5 if it was like that. And nor would the play go towards its climax and its end. Avoid these extremes. Dear brothers and sisters, let us remain faithful to the witness of the saints of North America whom we commemorate today. I want to close with one of the stikera from Vespers that was served last night, which gives expression to this notion that in every day and age, in every place, the saints are indeed expressing the sanctity of God anew. Rejoice, O mountains of Pennsylvania. Leap for joy, O waters of the Great Lakes. Rise up, O fertile plains of Canada. For the elect of Christ who dwelt in you are glorified, men and women who left their homes for a new land. With hope, faith, and patience as their armor, they courageously fought the good fight. Comforted by the beauty of the Orthodox faith, they labored in mines and mills. They tilled the land. They braved the challenges of the great cities, enduring many hardships and sufferings, never failing to worship God in spirit and truth, and unyielding in devotion to his most pure mother. They erected many temples to his glory. Come, O assembly of the Orthodox, with love let us praise the holy men, women, and children, those known to us and those known only to God, and let us cry out to them, rejoice, O saints of North America, pray to God for us. Amen.